Did you hear any of that in court? Quite remarkable statements by the victims' families.
Yes, I did, and I certainly was moved by what each individual said around the issue of hate. And it sort of reminded me of something my grandfather, who was a Christian minister, said when he lost his son and his wife. My grandmother was gunned down in a church. Of course, the world knows that my father was gunned down, but my grandfather's wife was gunned down in a church in 1974 while the church she was playing in the organ playing the Lord's Prayer. And my grandfather used to say that I love every man, I'm every man's brother. The man that killed my lovely wife or the man that killed my son, I refuse to reduce myself to the level of hating them. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother. So in a sense, what I heard today was similar. What it basically shows is what these women and men and the families and what was taught at this church is something that these people, these individuals and these families have chosen to live. And it is a very, very powerful testament in my personal judgment. Very emotional. It was emotional for me to hear that. But to talk about going in love, that's what we have to do as a society after all this tragedy.
Do you believe that this was a hate crime, or was it the act of a mentally disturbed young man who, unfortunately, as President Obama said, had access to firearms?
Well, I certainly believe that it was a hate crime and a terroristic act. Definitely a hate crime based on the information that has been released. There seems to be no other reason. The young man stood up and said, "I'm here to kill black people," and he mentioned reasons why. So obviously this is a hate crime.
And you would see it in line with what happened to your father and your grandparents and other black people in the civil rights movement?
Well, I would certainly see it yes, certainly in that way. I would have to remind the audience that in 1963, 4 little girls had gone to church in Birmingham and at Sunday school, and members of the Klan had planted bombs in the church, and those little girls lost their lives. And then there have been threats really throughout history. Some of the threats are more known than others, as well as activities that have been carried out. But yes, this is definitely in line with what caused some of why my father was killed was because of hatred, but the fact that he was mobilizing people, black and white, and the powers to be did not want to see that happen.
And what does this tell us about relations between the races in the United States in 2015?
Well, it essentially says there's still a lot more work to do. I would say that the vast majority of Americans certainly do not harbor this kind of hatred. But unfortunately, there are significant pockets in areas of our country that do, in fact, harbor this kind of hatred. And somehow we've got to stomp that hatred out and really teach how we can love one another. My dad and others have said we must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools.
Extraordinary to outsiders that something like the Confederate flag is still flown on official buildings in South Carolina.
Yes, that is an issue that, in fact, I had an opportunity to work on it many years back, and it was actually on the Capitol building, and I was leading the organization that my father was the founding president of, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and we were slated to have our annual convention in the state of South Carolina. We chose to boycott the state and not have our convention that particular year because they refused to remove that flag. What they ended up doing was moving it to another site at a higher level They moved it off of the Capitol, but they did not move it off the Capitol grounds. Now, there are many who would argue that the flag should be there. In my judgment, the flag represents something negative to a significant number of persons, and it certainly has an appropriate place, and I would say that's a museum. But it does not need to fly over the state, but the people of South Carolina must make that decision. And looking at polling data, it's about 50-50. 50% believe it needs to be a relic of the past. 50% believe it needs to stay up. I hope that issue can be resolved, because what you need is a unifying flag, not a flag that creates any level of division.
Dylann Roof is now in the legal system in the United States. What do you think should happen to him?
Well, I, like many, am not a proponent of the death penalty. I would imagine that he will be charged and the penalty would be death. I certainly, again, do not believe in the death penalty, even with this heinous crime. I think that we have got to find a better way. I mean, for me personally, my father was gunned down, as I said, when I was 10 years old. My grandmother, when I was 16. We encouraged the state of Georgia and the county not to execute at least the gentleman with my grandmother, because we just believe that you can't weed out hate for hate. Is not the answer. You really do have to engage in love, and we have to find a way to forgive, which is a very challenging thing. But if these individuals can find love and forgiveness in their hearts, who have lost family members just a couple of days ago, certainly we as a community should be able to engage in the same type of behavior.
Mr. King, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.